Our next speaker, Molly Ramsey, is a Garrett County native. Molly started this past year as the county's watershed coordinator and sits on the Deep Creek Watershed Administrative Council. She earned a Master of Science degree in environmental science from the University of Maryland's Appalachian Laboratory and with additional graduate work in watershed management at the University of Puerto Rico and the SUNY College of Environmental Sciences and Forestry in New York. Molly's dedicated to protecting water resources through practical science-based solutions developed in partnership with local stakeholders. Molly serves as an advisor in the board to the board of the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation. Today, Molly's talk is entitled "The Deep Creek Watershed Management Plan: Progress on Our Shared Game Plan." Molly.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here and your support and interest in learning more about the Deep Creek Watershed. Many of you here today played integral roles in the push for and the development of the Deep Creek Watershed Management Plan. Your time and energy as stakeholders to ensure best research and solution strategies led to an ambitious plan. It's been responsible for valuable projects that address invasive species, zebra mussels and hydrilla, shoreline erosion, stormwater runoff, and as discussed earlier, the barometer for the health of the lake, ongoing water quality monitoring of the tributaries, coves, and the main stem of the lake. We've also seen strong advocacy bring in state funding and generous donations from community members. The actual work on the development of the plan, the nitty-gritty, sit down at the table together kind of work began in 2013 with the adoption of the plan in 2016. Over the intervening years, the DNR, PRB, MDE, Garrett County, Brookfield Renewable, University of Maryland Extension Office, Soil Conservation District, State Highway have partnered with the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation, the Property Owners Association, and others to implement the plan. Understanding what components of the plan have been addressed, what challenges and successes programs are experiencing, what next steps are needed that have not been tackled, and what unforeseen issues have emerged over nearly 10 years has been the important work of the steering committee this past year. I will be presenting an overview of these accomplishments, which tell a cool story of public and private partnerships that have been able to magnify impacts of projects, addressing big intertwined land and water challenges. So I don't know if this is relevant for this group, but I wanted to start with a question of what is a watershed and why a watershed approach? We use this term and it can be abstract to many. In fact, I was at a gathering recently of the usual suspects in this realm, and someone shared, I'm not sure I actually understand what a watershed is. So let's talk about that just for a second. There's this really great schematic there that shows the high elevation areas around the edge, the higher ridges, the low spots, and the different land uses: agriculture, factories, urban spaces, forests. And we have to be thinking about the water cycle. So precipitation falling on the land. And what we have in a watershed is we're thinking about this area of land where all of the water is flowing into the streams and ultimately the low-lying lake or receiving water body, which can be a stream, a river, a lake, and ultimately potentially an ocean. And it's also soaks into the ground and may be stored or taken up by plants. But along the way, it can pick up what's on the land with interactions with the land. And if warm water leaves a factory or fertilizers on a field before a storm, some of that can reach a ditch or a small tributary, then a larger stream, and then the lake. So it's all one connected system. So we can understand the complexity involved, the different stakeholders responsible for all of this different land use activity, the different uses and associated regulations for dealing with these. So the idea that a single entity, DNR, can manage all of this effectively, we can see that that would be quite a challenge. And so it really does take a partnership between different government agencies, but also with public interest groups and the general public to make this happen effectively. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. The original Deep Creek management plan, when DNR bought the land, it was in lake management led by DNR, as well as the Policy Review Board. But not too long after it became clear, there were lots of concerns that the watershed issues that were impacting the lake were not being addressed. And so there was the push for a watershed management plan. And so we now have that. And the watershed management addresses issues on the lands and the tributaries that drain to the lake. And so different partners, particularly DNR Forestry, MDE, and county staff on permits and compliance, Deep Creek Watershed Foundation, POA, and other donors fueling projects, including projects like stormwater management, shoreline erosion, and invasive species management, and Brookfield Renewable coordinating dam operations, and researchers from DNR, universities, and consultants on monitoring and analysis of different data sources and evidence for managing the lake, and landowners and businesses using best management practices for construction, stormwater, and recreation. So this very tiny font, what I want you to, to see is on the right-hand side, we have a schematic that's from this EPA guidance on how to develop a watershed management plan. We have around 6 different phases, 6 different steps. And in the first step is something that was pretty clear from the beginning who the key stakeholders were. These were vocal stakeholders, people who had different concerns and they wanted to be involved. So in that beginning phase, that was with the facilitation from DNR staff, getting those stakeholders from the roads department, the health department, the county public works, DNR, DNR recreation. So we're talking about recreational fishery, whitewater, Brookfield, and the other electrical operators of the dam, business interests, and lake watershed residents, and also, very important, the downstream communities of the lake and the Youghiogheny River. The second, one of the key steps in this building partnerships phase in the very beginning is articulating the shared concerns. And so these were clear to the group. There were these 4 key concerns of accountability, agency coordination, public understanding, water quality, specifically sedimentation, nuisance SAV, but also SAV important for fish habitat, impacts from growth, including impacts from recreational uses of the watershed in the lake, and lake levels. And so these groups, these different stakeholders were at the table developing this plan, created a vision, and they have a vision statement that guides this plan and this work of the group. Through partnerships with private landowners and government agencies, the Deep Creek watershed will improve its environmental stability and economic viability while retaining its rural landscapes and natural beauty so that for generations to come, local citizens and visitors have a special place to live, work, and play. It's quite a challenge. So there was a lot of this next phase, this characterization of the watershed, and some of that work DNR had been doing. But there were lots of really important studies that Tom shared some of that data, the 2009 to 2016 water quality trends, and Bruce talked about these different sedimentation studies, analyzing intensive stream monitoring data to help identify some of the key areas that the plan needs to address and how to address them. So this group developed very specific strategies for managing some of these goals. They had objectives within each of the 13 goals and around 4 or 5 very specific strategies for how to get those done. So we see these 13 goals. The first one, management, funding, and coordination. And that really is dealing with how is DNR, MDE, and the county going to be implementing this plan? What actions are going to be in place for the accountability to have this plan implemented? How will it be funded? And who will be part of that management team? And this was deemed one of the most important goals to be completed pretty rapidly after it was adopted. We are still working on that, that phase. This is the second goal is the watershed data collection, or that's the third one. The fourth one is managing land use, and this has a lot to do with the county permitting, the comprehensive plan, but also paying close attention to forested land use. We have another goal that's specifically about sustainable forestry, but as you'll see, some of these goals are fairly redundant, or they overlap a lot, which is understandable. Managing SAV. So SAV, that's important for fish habitat and water quality. And then what some users of the lake would consider nuisance SAV, and then also some invasive species that will cause, that can just really take over and are a known entity in other lake systems. Controlling sedimentation. And a goal to look at economic and environmental sustainability. This is always underpinning the goals and is an important but also challenging pain point for how we address a lot of these goals. Stormwater management, sewerage management. So at this point, there have been different studies to see what percentage of the lake had public sewer, what was the life span of some of the septic systems around the lake. So different specific goals with that. Recreational opportunities. So to expand recreational opportunities for the public around the lake, and also outreach, information, and as you'll see, DNR has completed almost all of those goals there. The public access is a real challenge. Forest retention. So DNR Forest Service has done a lot of work here. Lake water level regulation. This is a really interesting challenge and will continue to be. And then access to navigable lake waters. And this is specifically in the southern end of the lake that has historically had low lake levels. And so what we have in summers where we have really long dry periods is that there'll be properties that really their docks do not reach the water. And so this has been a recurring issue. And so what are some of the ways to address that? So this year, we were, in the end of last year, we were approaching the 10-year mark. We have a new watershed coordinator. This was a big goal, is to look at where are we with the plan and all of the different projects that have been done. So as we get into the plan and how we can assess where we are, we realize just how complicated this management plan is. And maybe it needs a little bit of refinement, so it's more of an implementation plan. And so that's something that we are working on. And so if you look at this table, I would think that we're in the implementation of the watershed management plan, but also the last step of measuring progress and making adjustments, that kind of adaptive management phase to the document. But we are also in that phase 4 of designing the implementation program, because we are really kind of trying to nail down that evaluation process. Who assigning responsibility for reviewing and revising the plan, and who's responsible for looking at the progress and how that will all shape up. So back to the steering committee. Last December, we convened a lot of the original steering committee members and all of the different relevant government agencies. And I asked everybody to work on a spreadsheet with me, a very detailed spreadsheet with me, and to fill in and correct all of the information that I had on the different projects that had been done over the last 10 years. And everybody was very willing and very helpful. And so we had this really big, massive spreadsheet. And then it was the work to put that together. And so then January through April, we met biweekly, and we simplified the plan into around 4 or 5 different themes, integrated themes of water quality, sedimentation, erosion, stormwater, etc. And I went through, this is the information I have. Is this correct? Is this what you understand has been done? And as we're talking about these, what are some of the challenges that you've faced in getting these projects done? What are some emerging concerns? We had a lot of discussions about that. But also, what are some opportunities for the partners who are sitting here today to help achieve some of those goals? And so then it was the work of putting all that information together and compiling it into a progress report that shows here are the main accomplishments with the different goals, who's been responsible, who's been kind of the lead on these different projects, what have been the impacts of these projects, what's remaining, what are some of the challenges, again, so that what we want to be doing moving forward is to have frequent meetings with different task forces. So for those agencies that it's most relevant or you have the strongest interest in working on together, we can be looking at some of those specific projects, pooling resources, be looking for funding to implement, and then also developing something really important, which is different performance measures so that we can evaluate our progress. We don't have enough of those in the current plan. So that's what we will be doing going forward and creating these annual work plans, these annual implementation plans so that we can see that we're on task. And particularly now when we feel that there will be more of a challenge in getting funding to implement a lot of these, it's really important that we be pooling our resources and our time. Excuse me. So I'd like to share some of these accomplishments to highlight the role that, what we really see a lot of these private and non-public sector stakeholders playing a really huge role. And we can see all of the things that DNR has been doing. It's really exciting. So the water quality and health protection goals. Let me see this ag. I have some images from some of the key projects. We have an MDE flyer talking about Cherry Creek. That's a really good example where you have both DNR and MDE doing water quality monitoring. MDE acid mine drainage office has been doing different treatments. They have different settling ponds. And there's a dozer on Cherry Creek that the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation pays for that limestone treatment. And so it was just recently taken off the 303 impaired tributary list for acid, iron, and aluminum because it had met those goals. It does still have a substrate that does have issues with sediment accumulation, but in terms of the water chemistry, it is doing much, much better. And as we became familiar with the DNR water quality studies, and that information, all of that data is available online, and you can go to the different stations and you can see what those averages, those monthly averages over time. And so that public sharing of the data, that public record is very important. And this page includes data from those continuous monitors that the Water Foundation has funded, as well as the POA. And in the bottom, you see a study that Deep Creek Watershed Foundation has completed and funded that looked at all 29 tributaries of the lake. So this is a great additional resource. DNR is able to do tributary studies, but they have to do tributary studies for the whole state. And so they're able to do those every so many years. But putting this data together gives us a good picture of the health of the tributaries. And that's something that we'll be working on, looking at potentially trying to find a source we can look more into that so we can identify what stream restoration projects might be needed. So there are several goals that have to do with land stewardship, erosion reduction, and habitat gains. And so one that's been mentioned is this 10 and 10 program. And that brings together, again, several partners. We have DNR, the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation, POA, University of Maryland Extension with Ashley Bodkins. And that just, it addresses so many goals of the plan. So stormwater runoff, sedimentation and erosion, and water quality. So it's a really important program that we would like to see to keep going, but also to expand it, but also to show some of the benefits of that project. And so one thing we would like to do is to be quantifying some of the services of those trees and the different vegetation for carbon sequestration, stormwater mitigation. So we're starting to look to see what might be feasible with the Forest Service tool called iTree. And that brings up another example is student resources. So West Virginia University has the Water Resources Institute, and they have an undergraduate student who's volunteering his time this semester to help with that. And I feel like we're very lucky. We have Garrett College, we have the Appalachian Laboratory that we would like to be looking into additional opportunities for that kind of collaboration. Okay, I can't see these well. So another project that Ashley has been working on is WaterWise. So it's the non-Bay, the Youghiogheny River watershed equivalent of Baywise, and that encourages property owners to do very ambitious land, sort of different practices on their property. So native species, some different nature-based stormwater infrastructure. It's very stringent, but it's a cool way to encourage people to be thinking about stormwater and water quality and their role in the larger watershed. Bruce gave a really good overview of all of the work that DNR has been doing with this. This is one of the biggest issues, or probably the biggest issue, impacting water quality in the lake and the longevity of the lake. It's a very complex issue where we have boat activity, water levels, and that are needing to be shared, water allocation that needs to be shared with a variety of users. Boat activity seems to be one of the really major impacts on shoreline erosion. And so that's something that we're hoping to be developing potential innovative ways of looking at this. So I don't want to get too much into it because we were just talking about that a lot. So aquatic vegetation and invasive species, Christina is going to be talking about this more specifically with nuisance SAV and the removal of that, a test method for removing that. There's a couple of programs for detecting and preventing the spread of invasive species like hydrilla, but also the zebra mussel invasive species, and that's the Launch Steward program that Garrett College students, and with funding from Deep Creek Watershed Foundation, and I believe that Brookfield Renewal also played a role in this with some funding for this Launch Steward program at the state park. One thing that we are wanting to do is to get more information on the mapping of SAV to see how that has changed over time. And the previous slide with the shoreline erosion, how that has changed over time. And so to pull that data together to get a sense of some of the hot spots of where erosion is occurring. All of these are very related. I'm not going to talk too much about water allocation, but this is a group of very interested stakeholders. So we have the property owners, and we have the whitewater community, and also the fishing community. And so I know that this was a struggle during that development, the management plan phase. And the next permitting cycle will be, I believe, 2032. And so we'd like to get started with the different participants to be thinking about what are some of the specific needs and how we can work together to have some of those addressed. And the foundation has a speaker, Don Rosenberry, who's going to talk about a method for different, a water budget model. I know that there's different kinds of like stakeholder modeling, which might be a cool way to look at different scenarios. So that's an interesting one. But right now the permit looks specifically at ecological and downstream needs. And it's quite a challenge for Brookfield to address these. And they've been doing a good job at meeting those temperature releases. And again, it's a challenge to get the number of releases for the whitewater community. It's very important for their local economy. So I won't get into this too much, just here are some of the things that, you know, these three main agencies have been able to complete these memorandum of understandings to be working together on the implementation of the plan. The policy review board meeting in terms of transparency and coordination has been a really important player. And they provide an important public forum for property owners and those interested to ask questions, to voice concerns. And so that involves DNR as well as different business and property owner interests. And Tom is going to be talking about the funding landscape soon. So I won't get into that too much right now, but that the importance of the State Lakes Protection Restoration Fund, and also the role that the POA and the Watershed Foundation for their donations for all of these projects we were just hearing about. There's a goal in the plan on recreational opportunities. So that's increasing information, sort of outreach about what you can do at the state park. And there is a goal for increasing public access to the lake. It's primarily private property access only around the lake, except for the state park. And so there have been a couple of efforts to work on this. So not successful yet, but I know that folks have a lot of interest in this. So in our meetings this year, we talked about a couple of challenges that we really weren't, that were on the landscape, but hadn't been discussed when the management plan was created. And in the last couple of years, we've seen these at the lake, that increasing frequency and duration of droughts, particularly last summer. The intensity of storms, so that increasing frequency of intense storms, which will increase erosion. It can lead to and require additional planning for flood resilience. And increasing temperature, which can cause stress for different forest tree species and particularly fish. So this isn't something that is in the plan, but will be the work of the steering committee to be considering, you know, what do we need to add to the plan so that we're addressing it. And the discussions opening up to the community. What are some other goals that we have not addressed or need to address to effectively manage the watershed? And I do think that this push and pull with the economic well-being of the lake is going to be a real specific challenge for sustaining the health whenever we're talking about boat activity, construction, development. It really may require some ambitious policies and work that there'll be some resistance to. So that's work for the future. I wanted to mention something that I've become more familiar with in the last couple of months, which is, and it's something that's been a real interest of mine as a watershed coordinator for the county, is making those linkages to the larger Youghiogheny River watershed. And could this be something that would be an additional goal for the watershed management plan? And that's to be stewards and partners to our downstream and upstream partners in the Youghiogheny River, not just in Garrett County, but also in Pennsylvania. And there is an effort to bring together Ohio River watershed partners and actually to work on a variety of shared goals. Specifically, when I met recently with some of the Monongalia River Coalition folks, there is concern and interest around flood resilience and water quality, specific acid mine drainage, failing septics. So how can we work together to help one another around those issues? And something that I thought was really interesting, whenever we think about that watershed scale, it helps us organize and maybe be more successful around these shared goals, but specifically folks talking about outdoor recreation and economic development around outdoor recreation. And so that larger Youghiogheny River watershed scale could be a really cool way to look at that. And whenever we think about the lake and we think about the river and the county, how can we maybe plan some ambitious ways of looking at sustainable development in the county? But that's my little plug. So that's all I have right now. So I'd just like to open it up to any questions. Yes. Sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Just checking with people outside there, Beth. I think what we'll do right now is we'll forego questions to Molly, and we'll have those in the panel at a later point. And we will go ahead and have our break now before Don Rosenberry's talk. So the break will take